Hey guys, so someone suggested that we don't do much of JavaScript projects. So let's create this project that is called a bulb on and off. So we're going to create these using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you can see when I toggle the button on and off, you can see it's like it's lighting up. So let's see how we can create this right now. So the very first thing, as always, we have a blank HTML template as well as an empty style.css. But our main focus is on JavaScript. So you're just going to brush off on the CSS bit. And let's get started on the CSS. So we just do write the default CSS styles. And then, so these are the defaults. And then what you are going to do now is to link the CSS with the HTML. So you're just going to do it by doing link CSS style.css. And then the next thing is to create this layout. So I'm just going to use a section. So I'm going to use a section. Inside the section, I'm going to have an image. And generally, how we are going to create this is that we are just going to toggle on images. So we do have two images that we are using to provide an illusion that the bulb is lighting on and off. So you're just going to use two images, and whenever you click, we just swap the images as fast as possible. So I'm going to create an image, and so you might ask yourself, where am I going to get these assets? Head over to my GitHub repository. The username is TechWithTwin. Let me just hover. So the username is TechWithTwin, and the project name or the repository name is TikTok-projects. And then look for a project called JS Bulb. This one is the project. Go ahead and click on the JS Bulb. Then you can see the bulb on and the bulb off images there. So I'm just going to drag those bulb on and off here in this window. So these are the two bulbs. So you can see this one is the bulb on and this one is the bulb off. So you're just going to switch between these images. Something to note is that these images need to be the exact size so that the illusion can be super fast. So initially I'm just going to use the bulb off. So we are done with the image. The next thing we need to add is the action buttons. So these action buttons, we are going to create a div with a class of action. So we can say actions. And then this one will hold two buttons. So we can say btn times 2. Then we'll create us two buttons. And then this button, the first button will be the on off button. So you can use off. The next button will be the on button. So you can use on. Let's add some IDs to this button. So we can do an ID of off. The other one can have an ID of off. So we are done with that. So let's first style this so that we can get started. So this is what we have. The image doesn't currently have a width. So let's add some width of maybe 250 pixels. And then you can see our image is there. So after that, what we are going to do is to style this a little bit, and then we can jump into JavaScript. So the very first thing, let's use flexbox to display the content to the center. So we can say display flex, justify content to the center. You can see it. And then I'm going to add a padding as always. So we can say padding of 2 rem to make sure the content is away from the body edges. And then let's add some background colors. So we want to add a background color of hash F8, F4, and then EC. That's the background. And then now, since we used a section, we can just grab it by the section tag. So we can do section, background color is white. You can see it. Let's add some border radius, or let's add some borders. So you can go to this project here whereby it has some predefined box shadows. To get that, you can also go to my GitHub repository under the README. Under the README, you can see the resources here. So the box shadow is here. So don't ask where they are coming from. So we are going to this and then look for one box shadow that you can use. I'm just going to copy maybe the second one and then paste that box shadow here. And then you can see it added there. So the next thing I'm going to do is to add some border radius to the section. So border radius of maybe 5 pixels. And also I'm going to add some borders. So I'm going to add a border of 0.8 pixels solid, then gray. You can see the border. Something else you might realize is that here you can see as if the border is broken, but it's not broken, is that the image is overflowing. So we can add an overflow of hidden here. Then you can see this one looking nice as we would expect. So next up, let's focus on the actions div. So the actions.actions. So display flex here. And then let's justify the content to the center. Let's add some padding. So you can see everything is too close. So we can say padding of 0.7 rem. All right, so that's okay. Then let's add some gaps. We can say a gap of maybe 0.4 rem. I think that's okay. The next thing is that to make sure the off is red, the on is green. So we are going to do dot actions. Let's first style the buttons, add the default button styles. So the first one is to add some padding. So 5 pixels, 10 pixels. All right. The next thing is to remove the borders. Border none. The next thing is to make sure the cursor is pointer. So we can say cursor of pointer. And finally, let's add some border radius of 5 pixels. That's okay. The next thing is to grab the individual button. So we could do that by using the ID, but let me show you a new CSS trick whereby we can use children to select the first child and the last child. So how you are going to do that is to say actions, give me the button, but give me the first child. This one will correspond to this first child, and then you can say background color of red. And then I think let's do a color of white here. All right. The next thing, let's grab the last child. So we only have 2 children. So this one is the first child. This one is the last child. So you can say actions, button, then give me the last child. And then this one will have a background color of green. Something else we need to add is that whenever you hover over the button, we want to change the opacity. So you can say dot actions. And then whenever you hover on any of the buttons, then we are going to add an opacity to the button of 7.7. And then let's also transform it to transform scale of 1.01. And then we are done with you can see now, whenever I hover over this one now looks a bit better. So the next thing is, how do we add the functionality? So to do that, let's head over to JavaScript. And let's create a script.js file. And before you forget, let's link up this script to the document. So we're just going to do script, and the source will be script.js. So to make sure that the script is working, we always maybe add an alert and see if the alert shows up or not. So if the alert shows up, the JavaScript is being loaded as we would expect. So the very first thing, I'm going to use the long route. There are so many ways of working around this. So the first one, I'm just going to grab everything I need and add it to a variable. So I'm just going to say on button is equals to document dot query selector. And then what do we want to select? We can select here by tag name, we can select by class name, and we can select by the ID. We gave these buttons some IDs. So we gave this one, and let's add this one should be on. So we can grab these buttons by their ID. So we can grab the on button by doing grab hash on. That one corresponds to the ID. So let's copy this down, and then we can grab the off button, and then the ID is off. So we have the two buttons. So we can listen on click events on these two buttons. So let's first create a handler function. So we can create a function. This one will be used to handle the click, and then it will receive an action. For now, don't worry about it. So what I'm going to do here is that I want to add event listeners to each of these buttons, and then call this function and pass it an action so that it can act on the click event. So we are going to start with the on button. So we can say on button dot add event listener. So the syntax of add event listener is that it receives two arguments. So the first argument is what type of event do you want to listen on? I want to listen on a click event. And then the next argument is who handles. It receives several arguments, but we are just going to focus on the two main arguments. I think those are the required arguments. So the first argument is always what action do you want to listen on? You can listen on a click event, maybe hover event, maybe you can listen on, mouse enter, double clicks, but specifically we are looking at the click event. And then the next argument asks ourselves who handles this action. Like this is like delegating an action to a person. So if maybe you want to send someone somewhere, that person is the one who handles the action that you are giving, or the instruction that you are giving. So this one we say handle click is the one that is going to handle. But now we are faced by an issue. I don't want to create two functions just for this. So what I want is that I want this function to handle both the on event handling and the off event. So how do I do it? If I do it like this, it will just call this function without passing any arguments. And we cannot call this function because it's not our job to call the function. This is JavaScript's job to call the function whenever we have the click event is captured. So what we can do is that instead of calling that function, we are going to wrap it inside an anonymous function. And now what you might realize is that when I call this function right now and pass it something, this function is not yet called. You have to understand this. This one is not yet called, and JavaScript will call it, which will in turn call our handle click function. So we cannot call the handle click function directly because it's not our job. We're just passing a reference. All right. Let me give you an example. So if you're in a classroom, and this classroom is an old school classroom which uses bells, or maybe in most high schools, you might see that there is in each classroom, or in a specified class, there is a person who is responsible for ringing the bell. So what does this person do? This person is like, for him to run the bell, they are like calling the handle click function. Like they are doing some actions, but whenever they are given that mandate, they are not actually ringing the bell. So something will trigger them to ring the bell, which is the time durations. So you are not going to ring the bell as soon as you are appointed as the bell ringer. This is exactly how this one works. So you're not going to ring the bell until our time reaches. So until we handle this click, we are not going to ring the bell. Right? Yes. So yeah, that's it. So we are not going to focus more on that. Maybe we could do that, explain about event listeners in another tutorial. But for now, let's focus on that. So we can add an event listener for the on button, and also we can copy this down and add an event listener on the off button, and then we pass an action here and say this one is an off. So what I'm going to do now here is, now this action can either carry an on or an off. So this action holds an on or an off. So I can act against that. So I have two ways. I could use an if statement. I can use a switch statement, whichever you want. But let's see how we can use a switch statement. So to use a switch statement, we want to switch based on something. So we are switching based on the action. switch against the action. So the action now can be either on or off. And then here we can start creating something called the cases. So the first case that we want to see if it matches is the on. And also when working with switch statement, the first thing you need to do is to break, because if you forget this, then all your statements will execute. So let's see how this one works. So let's assume the on action was captured. So the action here is on. We are switching based on that action, and then it tries to match the action with the cases. So it will match our case, and then it will execute this code. So what are we going to do here? So we also need access to the image. So we can say const image element equals to document dot query selector, and then we can grab the image. So the reason I'm using the image tag is because we only have one image, so I don't care about adding IDs or classes. Okay, so I need access to this image so that I can change its source. I want to just change its source to the next image, which now seems to look like the bulb is on. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is that I have my image element, so I can use the image element to do something. And what I'm going to do is to set an attribute. So these are called attributes. So ID is an attribute, class is an attribute, with source, these are attributes for the tags or for the elements. So I want to set an attribute, and the attribute I want to set is the source attribute. And since I'm an on, I want to set it to the bulb on. So bulb on. I hope you understand what is going on. So whenever someone clicks and we capture that they clicked on the on button, we're just going to set the attribute of the source to the image of the bulb on. So let's capture the next case. So we can say, we can use another case, but since we don't have other cases, we can use the default. So the default runs if none of these matches. So I'm just going to say image element dot set a new attribute source. Now let me set it to the image of attribute. So I'm just changing these attributes. So there's nothing new I'm doing here. So I'm just changing the source attribute, changing it. There's nothing new here. And the DOM allows us, so if you have access to an element, the DOM gives you a way to change an attribute. The same way you could change other things, but in our case, we are just focused on attributes. So let's test this out. So I want to go on. You can see the bulb on. So essentially what is happening, you're just switching the images. You can now see this one works as expected. So that's it, guys. Thank you for watching this tutorial. Let me know in the comment. Make sure you liked so that the algorithm can share with more people. Share with your friends and write down something. Thank you for watching, and see you next.